hearings. One is a hearing on SB 166. SB 166. And staff, could you give us a real overview of the bill?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. Senate Bill 166, sections 1 through 5 would be titled the Fostering Competitive Career Opportunities Act. The stated aim of the act would be to remove unnecessary post-secondary degree requirements from state employment considerations. State employers would be prohibited from making hiring decisions based solely on the lack of a post-secondary degree. And keep in mind, in the definition of state employers, which is on page 2, line 8, it states that the term does not include any state office or officer, department, board, commission, institution, bureau, or society in the legislative or judicial branches of the government. So this is something that would be applicable just to the executive branch. Baseline requirements, which is a defined term, would be determined for each job posting and would include direct experience or certifications, but not a degree requirement unless justified. However, a post-secondary degree could be required if it is necessary for specific skills that can only be obtained through the degree. Additionally, the provisions of Section 3 would not apply to any position filled by political appointment. And at that point, I'm on page 3, line 3. For any job posting that requires a post-secondary degree, a state employer would be required to include information in the job posting that substantiates the necessity of the specific post-secondary degree. Job postings would be required to include any tests or assessments that validate candidate competencies. Direct experience could substitute for a degree with specific years of experience required for different degree levels. State employers would be prohibited from requiring minimum experience or educational attainment for contractor personnel unless justified in the solicitation. And then for appeals and violations, those provisions can be found in new Section 5. Applicants could appeal adverse hiring decisions that are believed to be based solely on the lack of a degree to the State Civil Service Board. And any person could report an applicable job posting that requires a post-secondary degree that does not include the proper justification for such a requirement. Violations of the Act by state employers would require corrective actions, including reopening the hiring process. Administrative proceedings would follow the Kansas Administrative Procedure Act. There is an amendatory section in the bill to require the State Civil Service Board to hear appeals taken to it pursuant to the Act. Senate Bill 166 would become effective upon publication in the statute book. And with that, I'd be happy to take any preliminary questions.
Do we have any preliminary questions? Yes, Senator Reichman.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for presenting this bill. I guess my question is this common? I'll put in this requirement on executive branch. Do other states have bills or something like this?
Thank you, Senator. I am currently unfamiliar with the practices of other states, but that is something we could perhaps look into for you.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Any other questions? Seeing none? Thank you. Move on to our proponent. Or do we have a physical note on that? I didn't. Okay. Okay. We'll move on to our proponents, and our first proponent is the Kansas Department of Commerce Chief Counsel, and Bob North. Is he not here? I don't see him. Also, Amby. Oh, there. Okay. I'm sorry, they were walking there. Amber?
But I believe we're here to provide proponent testimony for Senate Bill 197. So if you would like, I could go ahead and sit down and wait.
166, excuse me. I'm on the wrong one. Okay, 166, a proponent would be Stacy Gerber with visiting fellow for Zero Action. Is Stacy here? But she's on WebEx. Are you still here?
Hi, thank you so much. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Thank you.
Thank you so much. So thank you for giving me an opportunity to support Senate Bill 166 in Kansas as it applies to removing degree requirements. My name is Stacy Goober, and I'm a visiting fellow for Cicero Action, a nonprofit that advocates for entrepreneurial solutions to public policy problems. Employers across the nation are facing a shortage of qualified workers, and Kansas is no different. State and local governments want to hire and retain the best workers for each job. Hiring managers often use a college degree sorting mechanism to help weed out applicants and streamline the hiring process. But college degree requirements often have little, if any, relationship to the requirements to perform a particular job. Removing degree requirements from specific roles will help open public sector employment to millions of qualified workers and will help states find more qualified workers to fill vital roles and help increase retention in public employment. Nationally, more than 70 million Americans have valuable work experience but lack a college degree. About 60% of public jobs require a college degree, even though only about 35% of workers have a college degree. Thus, even for an applicant with every skill the state needs to perform the job, that worker is too often blocked from the job. As of a couple of days ago, February 6th, the Kansas State Job Board had over 500 open roles posted. The nonprofit Opportunity at Work estimates that as of last January of 2024, 53% of the workers in Kansas were skilled through alternative routes, meaning they are highly skilled individuals, but they lack a college degree. That means that 53% of Kansas are barred from many state jobs, not because they lack the skills to perform the work, but simply because they do not hold a college degree. Skills-based hiring means that employers hire qualified individuals based on their skills rather than a degree. A general rule to consider, which was brought up in the bill, is that the job posting cannot require a college degree unless the agency can justify the need for the degree in that posting. We know that workers often gain important skills outside of the traditional classroom, either through military service, on-the-job training, apprenticeships, and in many other ways. Kansas can ensure that these skills are reviewed and applied rather than merely hiring workers who make it through a generic degree program but lack any training applicable to the role. And to answer your question, more than 25 states, both Democrat and Republican, have now enacted through either an executive order or permanent legislation. At the federal level, in his past administration, President Trump actually signed an executive order, 13932, to require the Office of Personnel Management to remove college degree requirements from federal job postings and work to implement competency-based hiring. President Biden also doubled down on this executive order, and in May of 2022, his OPM issued guidance to help other federal agencies use skills and assessments as the foundation of their hiring rather than the college degrees. Private sector employers are also beginning to follow suit and are standing up their own commitments to remove unnecessary degree requirements. It is time for states like Kansas to give more workers the opportunity to serve while also helping to address their own workforce challenges. By broadening the pool of workers who are qualified for public jobs, Kansas can expand employment opportunities for workers in their state, increase the number of skilled candidates working in the public sector, and mitigate talent acquisition and labor costs. Thank you for your consideration of Senate Bill 166.
Thank you, Stacy. If you'll stay on for just a moment, I don't see any other proponents. Are there any proponents? No. Okay. And are there any opponents? Neutral? Okay. Now we'll go to questions for Stacy and Senator Ware.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chair. And thank you for being here, Stacy. I completely understand the motivation and, you know, the reasons, and it all seems so logical. My back of my head niggling concern, though, is if this broadening and loosening our standards might in some way affect public health or any number of other areas. And so can you talk to that a little bit?
Absolutely. So the biggest misconception here is one, this does not devalue the college degree at all. And two, this mainly applies to roles where a college degree is unnecessary. So the purpose of this is that you're actually hiring individuals that are more skilled for the role that they'd be coming into. If you're looking at two different applicants, for example, and one has a generic college degree that has nothing to do with the role that they're applying to, versus another who's had on the job hands-on experience and would be a great fit, it's just providing that second individual that same opportunity to apply for the role, even though they don't have the college degree, but the fact that they're actually more skilled and more qualified for the position.
Thank you. And a quick follow-up. So you essentially said the same thing the second time that you said the first time. Who is going to be the person making the decision as to whether it's required or not?
Absolutely. So that's a number of different people. So you have the hiring manager who's going to also be speaking with the individuals that are in the role and that are in the positions both above the role, because this applies to both individuals that are entry level, but also individuals that are reaching that paper ceiling that are being promoted into other roles above. So what happens in this process, it's definitely a much more arduous process because the hiring manager has to take a step back and fully understand what skills are required for the individual in that role, what they're going to be doing, what they need to know. They can provide hands-on assessments, which can help them determine if that individual is actually truly skilled and will be successful in that role. So it's not an easy process, but in the end, you'll end up hiring a much more qualified individual for that position.
So my concerns would be in the hands of, we have to know that our hiring managers are qualified as well.
So it requires a lot of buy-in from individuals at all different levels, because the communication has to go down. Of course, you will face some individuals who might be hesitant to buy into this type of process. But once they see that you're actually hiring individuals that are more qualified, then they will understand the importance of the process. And a way to think about the types of positions that people are coming in for, think about some middle skilled roles, some IT roles. Think about if you, for example, had a cybersecurity position come up, right? And you had two applicants, someone who was in the military for 7 years and had hands-on experience, but no college degree, versus someone who just graduated with a liberal arts degree, but no actual experience, or maybe 1 year of experience. If you're putting the two candidates next to each other, then you could see that one would definitely be more knowledgeable and a better fit and wouldn't need to go back to school, for example, to get that college degree to enter into the position and be successful. But to your point, there are a number of positions that you do still need the college degree for. This really is just for a lot of those positions that we've kind of had this degree inflation where they never required a college degree in the past, but over the last, decade or so, suddenly this college degree has just been added into the hiring process, but not for an actual reason.
Thank you. Senator Tyson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Stacy, I'm looking at your testimony and it doesn't say where you're from.
I'm from New York. I am in New York now because I have a 2-year-old son who's sick at home right now. Otherwise, I'd be out there.
Okay, if I may, Mr. Chairman, so why is a New York group interested in what's going on in Kansas? And then my second question is, would this eliminate the requirement for the Secretary of Wildlife and Parks to have a biology degree? Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Absolutely. So I work for the Sister Institute. Sister Institute is based in Austin. We work across a number of different issue areas. This is an area that we've been working on for the last 3 to 4 years. With our help, this reform has been passed in a number of different states throughout the country. But even outside of the work that we've done, it's been passed in over 25 states. I think almost 26 in the last couple of weeks, because it's still kind of taking the country by storm. This is a very bipartisan issue. It truly just helps public sector employment. It helps people find meaningful careers and find employment that they weren't able to have before. It doesn't have any negative impacts because it doesn't devalue the college degree for the positions that still require the college degree. So we truly just want the best for individuals in different states throughout the country.
Senator Clem. I know.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I have a quick question. Do you think this will have any kind of negative impact on continuing education or folks that may just choose not to continue their educational pursuits?
So again, I personally don't think so. What it comes down to is the individuals that are still going for the college degree, they're going because they need it for positions that require a college degree, that require a specialization in a certain way. So for example, it's okay to post a degree if you need an engineer, right? And that person needs that experience and may or may not need that master's degree. That's fine. And you want to make sure that your job posting specifically states a degree in engineering or a master's in engineering or that specific skill set that they would need through that education route. This really applies to a lot of those positions, administrative assistants, a lot of IT roles, managers, supervisors, all these roles that you can become skilled in different ways, but a liberal arts degree or a degree in a specific area is not necessarily required.
Thank you. I'm going to back to Senator Tyson. And Senator Tyson, you ask your question again?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So would a biology degree be required for the Secretary of Wildlife and Parks if this were to become law?
So it depends what the hiring manager thinks. That could be a specific, if say you have your minimum qualifications and your preferred qualifications, absolutely, that could be a preferred qualification. I reviewed a position the other day in a state where it was a forestry manager, right? And so if you need that specific degree in forestry, absolutely. There are specific, to your point, there are specific roles that absolutely still require specific degrees. But outside of that, there are a lot of positions that don't. And that's where you can give that substitution option for those roles. And then individuals who are actually qualified for those roles can gain employment. So to your point, absolutely, certain positions do still require those degrees, but they require those specialized degrees if they need them. Not just a generic degree as like a check the box, for example.
Thank you. We have staff position, or staff has a answer to this. Oh, Kyle?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just wanted to clarify that on page 3 of the bill, line 3, it states that nothing in this section would apply to any position that is filled by political appointment. And the Secretary of Wildlife and Parks is a political appointed position.
Thank you. Senator Dietrich?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So, and this may be, well, I'll let you try and answer this if you would. So, do you not believe that an agency has the option of requiring either a secondary or a post-secondary or degree, depending on the job?
So I 100% think that depending upon the job and the requirements, it might be required, but it has to be required in the specialization and that job. So it completely depends on the actual job itself.
Okay, so if I can just follow up, I'm looking at, and Kyle, I think this might be, oh, it's Adam Prophet, sorry. So it says, any applicant who receives an adverse hiring consideration and who reasonably believes the decision was based solely on the applicant's lack of a post-secondary degree may appeal that decision. So if we have 3 applicants for the same job and it's not requiring a bachelor's degree, but the person that's hired has a bachelor's degree, does that mean 2 of those applicants who didn't get selected for the position can go to the Civil Service Board and ask for an appeal? That's the way that sounds to me.
So I can't comment in depth on that. What should be the case is that the applicants essentially become equal. But for the appeals section, that I cannot comment too in depth about.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions? Seeing none, thank you very much for being here today. We appreciate that. Are there any, I think I asked this, but I'll do it one more time. Are there any opponents? Are there any neutral? Okay, thank you. We'll close the hearing then on Senate Bill 166, and we'll open it on Senate Bill 197. And staff, could you give us an overview on 197?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Senate Bill 197 would extend the expiration date of the provisions in the Star Bonds Financing Act regarding Star Bonds projects to July 1, 2030. Senate Bill 197 would become effective upon publication in the statute book. With that, I'm happy to stand for any preliminary questions.
Any questions? Seeing none, thank you very much. Now, Amber, got a little ahead of myself there. Welcome to the committee. Go ahead.
Thank you. Thank you for allowing us to provide proponent testimony for Senate Bill 197. This bill extends the sunset on the Star Bond program from July 1st, 2026 to July 1st, 2031. With the Star Bond program booming, the agency is excited to continue the success. The Star Bond Act was established in 1999. Star Bonds are a financing tool that allows Kansas municipalities to issue bonds to finance the development of major commercial, entertainment, and tourism projects. The bonds are paid off through the sales tax revenue generated by the attraction and surrounding development. The intent is to increase regional and out-of-state tourism, increase economic activity in the state, and improve the quality of life of in those communities. Specifically, Star Bonds provide Kansas municipalities the opportunity to issue bonds to finance the development of major commercial, entertainment, and tourism areas and attractions, drawing visitors from across the region and out of state. The new sales tax generated by the tourism or entertainment attraction goes towards paying down the bonds that were issued to help finance the project. We currently have about 17 projects at various stages of completion and repayment throughout the state, and all these projects have spurred economic activity in each of the regions. The Village West District has been the most successful project to date. Village West now provides over $40 million in sales tax to the state general fund every year. It has created several $1 billion of private investment and created tens of thousands of jobs. Village West's record of improving both the economy and the general welfare of Wyandotte and the state as a whole is beyond dispute. During 2024, the agency assisted in 11 visitation and feasibility studies for potential Star Bond projects. These projects are all based on tourism-related attractions and will improve the quality of life in Kansas. They have an aggregate potential capital investment of several $1 billion and are located across the state. The extension in Senate Bill 197 is important to give these projects predictability and stability that the STAR bond program will be available. We've had recent grand openings this year at 2 STAR bond districts, including at Homefield in Wyandotte and at Blue Hawk in Overland Park. We also had in Manhattan, the Museum of Art and Light also have a grand opening this year. In our proponent testimony document that we've submitted, we have provided a current list of STAR bond districts, and you can see that we have STAR bonds across the state, not just in our urban areas, but in our rural communities as well. And the extension of the STAR bond program will allow Commerce to work with local communities to continue to utilize this tool. We currently are working with 3 rural communities, 2 of which, one in Colby and one in Great Bend, that have established their STAR bond districts and are going through the STAR bond process. The city of Hutchinson as well is currently undergoing the process as well. And when we worked with, when we did our presentation on the changes in the legislation that made it easier for rural communities to take advantage of the STAR bond program, one of the questions that we did get asked from these rural areas is, what about this sunset? How is it going to impact our potential project? Can we expect this to be extended? So extending the STAR bond program, I think, is going to allow some of these rural communities more time to get their projects and their ideas together so they can come to us better prepared to implement their project in their community. Because sometimes these projects can take some time, and with rural communities, they may not necessarily have all of the resources that a more urban city does. So as the committee is considering the extension, we also ask that you make a permanent fix in the statute to hold these established districts that have a grocery store harmless, since the state's food sales tax has been eliminated. STAR bonds do play an important role in growing the Kansas economy. It's a unique program that creates tourism and entertainment attractions. We look forward to supporting our current projects and working to establish new ones. Thank you, and if you have any questions, I'm happy to address them now.
Thank you very much. I do have one question. According to what you testified was it would run through July 1st, 2031, and actually it's only a 5-year extension. It should be 2030 according to the deal.
That might be my error on my sheet, so
I think we talked about a 6-year and we actually went to a 5-year extension. So 2030 is the deal. Are any questions, committee? Yes, Senator Tyson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for your testimony. So you stated the positives, but what about the negatives? What about the project that was in bankruptcy? And what about all of the furniture, mom and pop furniture stores that were put out of business as a result of STAR bonds in the Johnson County area?
I assume you're speaking about Prairie Fire in terms of the bankruptcy, and I'm not sure bankruptcy is the appropriate legal term to use. What I can say about Prairie Fire is that they have added retail into their district to help boost sales in that area. And this, I know that they have now a chicken and pickle and likely other retail that I just don't know off the top of my head. But what I can tell you is this past year, they have been able to make a payment towards their outstanding bonds. So I think that that shows positive progress for that particular STAR bond project. As for, to address the second point of your question, the legislative post-audit, I think, demonstrated that STAR bond projects actually increase the job density in certain industries that are related to quality of life. And so I think that that is a positive attribute to these STAR bond districts. And I think it's also reflected in the amount of sales tax that we're seeing collected throughout all of the districts.
Yes, Senator Tyson.
Thank you. You're right. I stand corrected. It wasn't bankruptcy, but they did not have enough revenue, sales tax generated in order to pay it. So as you said, they expanded the district in order to shore up an unsuccessful project. I don't know, I have grave concern over this. This is government picking winners and losers, Mr. Chairman. And I think the department has given us the rose-colored glasses because she didn't address the businesses that were put out, the mom and pop businesses. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Titus.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Do you have data that would show us the amount of sales tax for star bonds that have been collected from out-of-state folks and the amount that has been collected from outside the county so that we can measure whether it's effective as a tourism measure?
That I would have to ask the Department of Revenue. I know that they code the sales tax differently within a district, so that's how they segregate it. And I do know that there is, but I'm
Tracking who's going to star bond districts?
we are obtaining visitation data from the communities that are participating in the Star Bond Act. So, and that is something that we have been updating in our annual report. So, I know certain districts that were established before those legislative changes have tried to provide us with that data, but we're seeing a lot of our districts throughout the state actually reporting visitation data. And we are also in the process, the Kansas Department of Commerce itself, working with one of those software companies to try to obtain that data as well. We're in the very initial stages of just ensuring that the program is accurately capturing the district, and so, but once we have that hopefully finalized, we'll be able to compare our numbers with what the cities and the attractions themselves report.
Provide the committee what you have before we work this bill so that we have some sort of baseline?
In terms of visitation numbers, or?
Well, as close as you can get to who's paying the sales tax in a star bond district. Whether you can only provide that in visitation, so be it, but whatever you can collect.
Yeah, we're happy to provide the visitation numbers that we have, and
Could you make a request to revenue? You said you thought they had some of that information.
I don't know if they have that information, but I can certainly ask. But what I can tell you is we're happy to provide you with the sales tax that's collected in the districts. That's something that we have to do, and that we provide in our annual report every year.
I mean, my main question is whether it's coming from outside the community or it's just the people that were already shopping there are paying that is really the question I'm asking.
Yeah, and I'll have to ask the Department of Revenue if they can.
My understanding, one part of the information that is available would be the credit card receipts, and they would tell us where their credit cards are registered and where they're from. And I think that's something that could be available to us.
We can certainly ask our communities and our attractions if that's something that they can provide us.
Are there any other questions? Yes, Senator Clem.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. I do want to layer on to Senator's question as well. I think there could be an easy button, especially on the racetrack. As far as capturing that information of inside and outside, it would tell a good story as well. So it's, I think there's 4 years left on that contract with Star Bonds, if I'm not mistaken. So it'd be I think it's a good exercise to go through. If we're touting all of the benefits, it could really help the story as well. So I'd love to see that information.
Certainly, I can make a request to see if we can't get that information. What I can say, at least for the Speedway, which I think is what you're referencing, is those Star Bonds are going to pay off within the time period that they're allowed. So, and that should be coming up fairly soon. And I do want to, I'm sorry, I just want to make a note, just in case I misspoke. Prairie Fire did not expand their district, more so the district remained, but new retail came within that district that is boosting up the sales in that district.
That was actually the intent of the district, is that right?
Well, all our Star Bonds need something inside of them to generate sales, especially if it's an empty area like Village West was back whenever it was implemented. So certain districts obviously are building an attraction within an already existing retail space. So obviously we want to bring in new retail into that area as well so we can boost those sales so that way we know we can pay off the bonds that we issue.
Okay. Any other questions? Thank you very much. We appreciate your testimony today. Second proponent is Mr. Jason Watkins from Wichita Regional Chamber of Commerce. Jason, welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm going to be really quick because I'm losing my voice. But Jason Watkins, Wichita Regional Chamber of Commerce. Star Bonds program's been an important program in the South Central Wichita region of the state. A lot of good projects over the years. I think our community would look a lot different if not for Star Bonds. Would also say that over the years, the legislature has done a lot of good work tightening up the Star Bonds program. There were, without question, some projects in the past where maybe some questions should have been raised. They were raised. The legislature, I think, has done a good job of trying to tighten this up so that it's a program that works in the way that it was originally intended to work. And that's to bring folks in from other regions, other states. It's an important part of growing the Kansas economy. And again, it's been important to Wichita. So happy to stand for questions at the appropriate time.
Thank you. Questions? I will ask one question, and that is, does Wichita keep track of the question we just had earlier about the out-of-state revenue coming in for these 5 or 6 projects that you have?
Yeah, I heard, Mr. Chairman, I heard when that question was asked earlier, and I don't know exactly what the mechanism is for doing that. But it's my understanding that that is part of the requirements. Now, again, the chamber doesn't actually administer or participate in any Star Bonds programs, so my knowledge is really wide and not very deep. But you know, that is part of what is supposed to be tracked.
Thank you very much. Okay, we don't have any, do we have any opponents? Any opponents? Yes. Okay, Elizabeth Patton.
Thank you. My name is Elizabeth Patton. I am the State Director for Americans for Prosperity, and I am here today to rise in opposition to Senate Bill 197. We have long felt that the Star Bond program does not achieve the economic goals that it purports to achieve by the Department of Commerce. We also understand that there is a lot of interest by state lawmakers in continuing the program in one way or the other over time. So while we do wish, in an ideal world, that this program would sunset and we would look at other potential opportunities the state could have in their proposed toolbox that don't put taxpayers on the hook, we have proposed in my written testimony quite a few changes that we think ought to be made to the program in order to actually make it more effective. I won't go through all of them, but I did want to highlight a few pieces of that in particular. While it is true that there have been attempts in the past to strengthen the Star Bond bill, we don't think that they've gone far enough, and we think Star Bonds lack transparency to Kansas. As another point to this, my foundation, Americans for Prosperity Foundation, has tried for the last 3 years with a Kansas Open Records request to achieve some of the very data that was just asked by the committee, among other things related specifically to the Star Bond program. We have been unsuccessful in getting that. Primarily, it is our belief because it doesn't exist. Frankly, we have also filed that, Americans for Prosperity Foundation has filed some complaints with the Attorney General's office related to that over the years as well. There are a lot of things here that I would be happy to go over in greater detail with any of you, but we do have an amendment prepared if anybody is interested in making some specific changes there. We think that we also need to make sure we are protecting property rights and that we are making sure that we are actually achieving the goal of this being a tool for tourism, because right now we believe that, in fact, based on the data that we have been able to get, which again is I will admit, somewhat limited due to perhaps the fact that it doesn't exist. We do have a few things from legislative post-audit and other pieces of information. It is basically, I think the state has basically foregone a little over $80 million in sales tax revenue for star bonds, according to Legislative Post Audit. Additionally, we have found that the opening of the Nebraska Furniture Mart in Village West Star Bond, when that happened, over a third of the existing furniture stores within a 150-mile radius closed. And we believe that while it is nice to have a pretty new building, we need to make sure that we are not, in fact, putting our existing businesses in a situation where we're picking winners and losers, and instead at the behest of the government, we are putting them out of business for something that is perhaps not actually driving tourism to the area, which we think is lacking in many of these star bond programs, projects, which was the initial intent of the program. So in our view, in order to get us to the initial intent of the program, it requires quite a bit of review and reform, and I would be happy to stand for questions at the appropriate time.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. On the taxpayers being on the hook, I just wanted you to walk me through that a little bit, because my understanding has always said it's primarily the bondholders that are on the hook, and the bondholders are the sophisticated investors who make the decision to purchase those bonds, and if they don't get repaid, they're the ones really on the hook. Is the argument, though, that all taxpayers are somewhat on the hook because that foregone revenue has to be made up by other taxpayers? I just want to understand the argument. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
A couple different ways. Yes, in that foregone revenue has to be made up by taxpayers in some way or the other. And also the tax rates within those star bond districts are a lot higher than they are in other districts. And people who are shopping there are bearing a much higher brunt in most of those areas that we have looked at than shopping in other areas. So they are paying for it, whether it's in one way or another because they're choosing to shop there. But they are paying for it in the excess there. But also, in addition to, every Kansas taxpayer is on the hook for, a lot of lost revenue to the state. And we're not sure that they are actually meeting, we're not getting that back.
But there's some argument that it's sort of like what is the percentage of zero, because then you can make the argument that if some of these things weren't there would have been no tax revenue at all. So it's like, well, the people of Kansas would have taxpayers would have had to make up 100% of zero, right? Because ostensibly some of these things wouldn't have existed. So there's that argument as well. So it is a bit of a give and take, and depends probably development by development, project by project.
It depends in some ways, project by project, but not necessarily. Like I mentioned, there were a lot of furniture stores surrounding Nebraska Furniture Mart that went out of business when it opened. So we lost a lot of small business and entrepreneurs in the surrounding areas that did exist, and they are gone. They are gone now. So what we don't see is that affirmative. It looks more like, from the data we have, that we are moving things to a certain area, but that it's not necessarily bringing new, but we're just shifting where things are located. We have seen a very real lack of evidence that it's really driving additional growth that actually wouldn't be there without something like that, without at least a loss in some other way. So the balance there, it is of concern, and I don't think we're getting the ROI that we should.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Appreciate it.
Senator Clem.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you. So one of the questions, it seems like there's two different groups. If I think about the stadium, not Chiefs and Royals, just the soccer stadium,
Sure.
the racetrack, those would be unique things that may be different than a furniture store that does significantly affect
Right.
Our local small business.
Right.
Is there a distinguishing in your mind? Maybe it calls for additional separation of thought?
I think that's one big reform that could be made to the Star Bond program. I think right now it can be used for just about anything. And in fact, if it's actually supposed to be for regional and out-of-state tourism, number one, there needs to be a lot done to make sure that we are actually tracking that information, which has not been done well in the entire time the Star Bond program has existed. And there's no proof that we're actually driving those kind of tourism numbers to our state. It just doesn't exist. And the other piece of that is, sure, okay, let's grow tourism in Kansas. Let's do that well, and let's do that with a program that is transparent and accountable to Kansas and to our state. And that is good. So what we would ask is that it's a good incentive program, if I could say. Now, I will say that, I think those of you who know me know that, I don't know that there's a good incentive program in some terms, but I could argue that one that is more successful than others, from my perspective, is one that has adequate transparency and adequate accountability and can support successful numbers from economic development in a meaningful way. And has clawbacks in it in case of failed project. So those are items that could be added and changed in this bill, we think, to make sure that, to your point, okay, then we can split the baby here and say, let's have this tool for true tourism projects, but for all the projects that it is currently being used for, I think it genuinely misses the mark on the initial intent of the program.
Thank you, Ms. Patton. Could I add one more onto that? So it's more of a curiosity question. Is there no requirement before we would approve a Star Bonds event, that there's a requirement to show how we would obtain that information? There's a lot of tools available that are almost a commodity now that would allow us to track whether that person is in or outside the state. That as an ongoing requirement, that would be included in that? Is that part of the amendment that you had talked about, or is without?
Yeah, part of that is to strengthen that. I think in the law as it stands, there are some nominal changes that were made to try to, I will say in quotes, strengthen the bill. We don't think that they've been, what am I looking for? There's not enough teeth in that per se, and that we need to go a little further to make sure that we are actually getting that data and that information so that we can hold this program accountable and transparent for what it's actually supposed to be doing. And that would be, in our view, honestly, the bare minimum duty to taxpayers. If we are going to be approving these projects, we need to know this information, and that we should include greater transparency and requirements there, and better data.
Any other questions or comments? Yes, Senator Titus.
Thank you, Ms. Patton, for your testimony. I'm just curious, this is sort of a hypothetical, so bear with me, but if we were more straightforward with the purposes of Star Bonds and how they're being used in the legislative declaration, because I think it's fair to say it's changed over time how they've been used, would you still have the same objections if we redefine the program?
If we were able to redefine the program, and especially in some of these ways that we've outlined, I think that, so from a perspective of where we come from as an organization, we don't prefer to see incentive programs overall. So I will say that we'd like to see reforms that lower the threshold for success for everybody so that all businesses have an opportunity to succeed at the same rate. So we think a lot of times that can be done in policy without taxpayer dollars. Happy to get into that more, but so I say if we had better clawbacks, transparency, and accountability in the Star Bond program, and it was a little more fine-tuned and strong to be more mission-focused, then I think we would be more understanding of its purpose as a tool for our economy.
Thank you.
Senator Tyson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for your testimony. I don't think this is a question for you, but the fiscal note I find interesting. There's no cost for the Department of Commerce to administer these, or I don't see anything on the fiscal note that includes it. It just says it's good for economic development. So could we get an updated fiscal note?
Yes, we'll try to get one. On that. Ms. Patton, I have a question. We are listed on the back of the document which we received from the Department of Commerce, about 17 projects in here. We have talked about one of those projects being negative in the start. Hopefully it's made a little bit of headway into becoming a positive for the economically. Are there any others out there that you've seen that are negative?
There's been a handful that I've seen come through in the last few months that I have looked at and thought that just doesn't seem to, in my view, meet the intended goal of the Star Bond bill for tourism. But off the top of my head, I apologize, I'd need to look at the list precisely to remember which ones those were, but there have been a handful that I've been concerned about.
Okay, thank you. Are there any other questions? Yes, Senator Cluse.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Based on the conversation here, where are you at then on this sunset date?
In a perfect world, I would like it to sunset this year. But if it is for another 5 years, then I am asking for some of these changes that I've put forth in my testimony to make it, in our view, a more successful program.
Other questions? Seeing none, thank you very much for your testimony today.
Thank you.
Committee, we also have 4 written-only proponents. If you would take a look at those. And at this time, we will close the hearing for 197. I will say that we will be working a couple bills tomorrow. And that would be Senate Bill 51 and Senate Bill 52. And if you have amendments for that, please bring those written. If you get those to Connie so she could get those up, if you could get a copy of those amendments. Bring a paper copy is what I'm saying. Make sure we're ready, not conceptual. So, any other questions? We are adjourned. Thank you.